Fire Dragaman. One time Jack and his two brothers, Will and Tom, were all of them laying around the house. Weren't none of them doing no good, so their daddy decided he'd set 'em to work. He had him a tract of land out in the wilderness of a place back up on the mountain. Told the boys they could go up there and work it. Said he'd just give it to 'em. It was a right far from anywhere anybody's lived at, so they fixed 'em up a bag and load of rations and stuff for the housekeeping, and they pulled out. There wasn't no house up there, so they cut poles and notched 'em up a shack. They had to go to work in a hurry to get out any crop, and they set right into clearing them a new ground. They decided one boy'd have to stay at the house till 12 and do the cooking. The first day, Tom and Jack left Will there. Will went to fixing around and got dinner ready and went out, and he blowed the horn to call Tom and Jack, and he looked down in the holler, and there came a big old giant stepping up on the mountain. Had him a pup about 4 foot long, and he had a big old blue long beard that dragged the ground. When Will saw that old giant, he was headed right for the house. He ran, and he got behind the door, and he pulled it back up on him, and he skirted it up against the wall, just shaking like a leaf. The old giant came to the house, reached in and threw the cloth back off the dishes, ate everything on the table in one bite, sucked them plates, snatched him up a chunk of fire, and lit his pipe. The smoke came a-billowing out. Then he wiped his mouth, and he went on back down the holler with that old pipe sending up smoke like a steam engine. Tom and Jack came on in directly and says, "Why in the world ain't you got us no dinner, Will?" "Law me," says Will, "if you'd have seen what I'd have just seen, you'd have not have thought about no dinner. And old Fire Dragaman came up here and ate everybody on the table and sopped the plates." Tom and Jack laughed right smart at Will. Will says, "Y'all needn't to laugh. It'll be your turn tomorrow, Tom." So they fixed up the victuals that they could, and they all went to work in the new ground. Next day, Tom got dinner and went out and blowed the horn. There came old Fire Dragaman. "Law me," says Tom, "where'll I get?" He ran and he scrambled under the bed. Old Fire Dragaman came on up, ate everything that was on the table, sopped the plates, and licked all off the pots, lit his pipe, and pulled on down the holler. And the black smoke was a-rolling out just like a chimney. It was a sight to look at. Will and Tom came in a few minutes later and said, "Where's our dinner, Tom?" "Dinner of the nation. Old Fire Dragaman come back up here. Law me, it was the beatin'est thing I ever seen." Will says, "Where was you at, Tom?" "Well, I'll tell you," says Tom, "I was down under the bed." Jack laughed, and Will and Tom says, "You just wait about laughing, Jack. It'll be your time tomorrow." Next day, Will and Tom went down to the new ground. They got to laughing about where Jack would hide when old Fire Dragaman came. Jack fixed up everything for dinner, went on about 12 and blowed the horn, looked down the wilderness, and there was old Fire Dragaman. He was coming up the hill with his hands folded behind him and looking around this way and that. Well, Jack, he just went back on in the house and started putting stuff on the table. Never paid no mind to that old giant, just went on right a fixing dinner. Old Fire Dragaman came on up. Jack was scooping up a mess of beans out of the pot and says, "Why, hello, Daddy." "Howdy, son." "Come on in, Daddy. Get you a chair. Dinner's about ready. Just come and stay and eat with us." "Oh, thank you, I couldn't stay." "It's on the table. Come on, sit down." Nope, I just stopped by to light my pipe. Come on, Daddy, let's eat. Nope, much obliged, I got no time. Fire Dragaman reached in to get him a coal off the fire, took the biggest chunk in the fireplace, stuck it down to his old pipe, and started on that. Jack looked out, followed him with all that smoke billowing out, watched where he went to, and saw him go down a big straight hole in the ground. Will and Tom came on up to the house, saw Jack was gone. Will says, "Well, I reckon that's the last of Jack. I bet you $1 old Fire Dragaman's done took him off and ate him. Dinner's still on the table." So they sat down and went to eating. Jack came on in directly. Will says, "Where in the world you been, Jack? We followed old Dragaman. Had done, we allowed old Jack fired, shoo!" We allowed, what's that word?
Loud?
We allowed old Fire Dragaman had done eat you up.
It's lowered.
I've been watching where old Fire Dragaman went to. How come dinner yet on the table? I tried my best to get him to eat, says Jack. He just lit his old pipe and went on back. I followed him, saw him go down into a big hole out yonder. You right sure you ain't lying, Jack? Why, no, says Jack. You boys come with me and you can see the place where he went in. Let's just get us a rope and a basket so we can go in that hole and see what's down there. So they got a big basket made out of splints and gathered up a long rope they'd done made out of hickory bark, and Jack took 'em on down to old Fire Dragaman's den. "Will, you're the oldest," says Jack. "We'll let you go down first, and if you see any danger, you shake the rope and we'll pull you back up." Will got in the basket and says, "Now you recollect now, whenever I shake that rope, you pull me out of there in a hurry." So they let him down, and directly the rope shook and they jerked the basket back up. "Well, what'd you see, Will?" "Saw a big house. It's like another world down there." Then they slapped Tom in the basket, lay him down. The rope shook. They hauled him back. "Well, what'd you see, Tom?" "I saw a house and a barn." Then they got Jack in the basket. They lay him down. Jack got down on top of the house, let the basket slip down over the eaves and right down on the yard. And Jack got out. He went and knocked on the door. Well, the prettiest girl Jack had ever seen came out. He started right in to courting her, says, "I'm going to get you out of here." She says, "I got another sister too in the next room yonder, prettier than me. You get her out too?" So Jack went on in the next room. The second girl was a heap prettier than the first. Jack went to talking to her and was a courting right on. Said he'd get her out of that place. She said, "Well, I got another sister in the next room, prettier than me. Don't you want to get her out too?" "Well, I didn't know there was any prettier than you," says Jack, "but I'll go see." So he went on in. Time Jack saw that and knowed she was the prettiest girl that ever lived. So he started right in, off of talking and courting to her. Plumb forgot about them other two. That girl said to Jack, "Oh, Fire Dragaman, he'll be back in here any minute. Time he finds you here, he'll start in spitting balls of fire." So she went and opened up an old chest, took out a big sword and a little vial of ointment. Says, "If one of them balls of fires hit you, Jack, you rub on this little medicine here right quick. And this here sword is the only thing that will hurt old Fire Dragaman. You watch out now and kill him if you can." Well, that giant came in the door directly, saw John, and commenced spitting balls of fire all around here, some of them big as pumpkins. Jack, he went to dodging around and trying to get that old giant with that sword. Once in a while, one of them fireballs would glance him, but Jack rubbed that ointment right quick, and it didn't even make a blister. Finally, Jack got in close enough and clipped him with that sword, took his head clean off. Then Jack made that girl promise she'd marry him. So she took a red ribbon and got Jack to plait it in her hair. Then she gave Jack a wishing ring, and he put it on her finger, and they went out and got the other two girls. They were awful pleased. They told Jack they were such a little bitty children when the old giant catched them, and they could barely recollect when they first came down here. Well, Jack put the first one in the basket and shook the rope. Will and Tom hauled her up, and when they saw her, they commenced a fighting right off to see which one would marry her. She told them, says, I got another sister down there. Is she any prettier than you? Says Will. She says to him, I ain't a-saying. Will and Tom chucked that basket down in a hurry. Jack put the next girl in, shook the rope. Time Will and Tom saw her, they both asked her to marry and went to knocking and a beating over one another over her. She says, stop 'em. We got one more sister down there. Is she any prettier than you? Says Will. She says to him, you can see for yourself. So they slammed that basket back down, jerked that last girl up. Law me, says Will, this one's here I'm gonna marry. Oh, no, you ain't, Tom says. You'll marry me, won't you now? No, says the girl, I've done promised I'm going to marry Jack. Blame Jack, says Will. He can just stay in there. And he picked up the basket and the rope and throwed him down the hole. There ain't nothing much to eat down here, says the girl. He'll starve to death. That's just what we want him to do, says Will. And they took them girls on back up to the house. Well, Jack ate everything he could find down there. But in about 3 days, he saw the rations were running awful low. He scraped up every bit there was left, and then he was plumb out of victuals. He didn't know what to do. In about a week, Jack had commenced to get awful poor. Happened he looked at his hand, turned that ring to see how much he'd fallen off. I wish I was back home, sitting in my mother's chimney corner, smoking my old chunky pipe. Next thing, there he was. Jack's mother asked him how come he wasn't up at the new ground. Jack told her that was exactly where he was started. When Jack got up there, Will and Tom were still a-fighting over that youngest girl. Jack came on in the house and saw she still had that red ribbon in her hair. And she came over to him and says, oh, Jack. So Jack got the youngest, and Tom got the next one, and that throwed Will to take the oldest. And the last time I was down there, they done built 'em 3 pole cabins, and they were all doing pretty well. Then, yay!